What's up, YouTube? Your boy Valenoff here today with the Builds of Power contest submission for Team Ra, aka Team Vision GL. Reminiscent of Archimonde's Finger of Death in both appearance and practice, this build tries to boost the damage of one spell and really push the limits of what one button press can actually do. So if you like what you see in the build today, please vote for me in the contest. Please subscribe to the channel for more Last Epoch content. Let's get into this. So starting out, bringing the pain, we see this Corruption 300 Rye fight, which only lasts about 9 seconds. You can see the burst that's capable from our Mirror Bolt damage. You can really see what the damage we're pumping out when you look at it in slow motion on the dummy. You can see all of those over 1 million crits stacking up. The total from one Mirror Bolt double cast through the Ruining Scrolls is roughly 14 to 15 million damage. And you can see again that burst being showcased against T4 Jury here. How we get to this amount of damage? Well, first, we're using Fundamental Criterion, a armor that boosts our damage, which we'll go over in the gearing more, combined with massive elemental penetration from the Runic Invocation skill tree, which is currently bugged, unfortunately, no way around it. Kind of makes up for the fact we're missing out on some more multipliers from the tree. And we also have a huge more multiplier from our Frost Wall. So the way it works with Frost Wall is you have to wait for as long as possible before you walk into that frost. But we get a stacking for every second the wall is alive, a 30% more multiplier. We can get upwards of 8 seconds out of our Frost Wall, meaning we can get 240% more multiplier. Now, when we do physically cast our Runic Invoke with the hotkey, we do get another more multiplier from the tree, so that is a little bit higher damage than casting it from our Flame Rush, but quality of life wise, Flame Rush is the way to go. So we cast our Rune Bolt frequently to top our mana off and to add Armor Shred stacks and keep our Rune Weave stacks up. Flame Rush casts our Mirror Bolt, which is key to keeping us alive. Our Mirror Bolt generates a large amount of ward on hit. When you're first engaging in combat in arenas and higher corruption content, you want to make sure you're leading with your Rune Bolts and that you always have 3 runes when you stop casting Flame Rush. Because if you don't get that ward on hit from your Mirror Bolt when you engage in combat, most likely you're going to die because you are pretty squishy without your ward. So either casting Flame Ward before you engage to get that initial DR and ward. It's pretty important. I've only tried pushing arena once. I got to about 190, 195. Really wasn't paying attention. Watching YouTube, just died. I definitely think we could push further if we went ahead and tossed on a red ring and a Foot of the Mountain setup. Which I probably will do maybe some point later this week. So you may see my character's name on the leaderboards. We can stay tuned to that later. But I really have been enjoying the build. It's really smooth. The gameplay is pretty straightforward. You cast your Rune Bolts, you Flame Rush in, stuff just dies. It feels really great. I mean, you really have a lot of nice burst ward generation when you need it. And you have nice single target. I mean, overall the build feels really smooth and rewarding to play. And I've been extremely happy with the results I've had, and I'm definitely going to continue playing this build after the contest is over. And I hope some of you out there will too. Hopefully even Mike will be playing this on stream next week. Or later this week, rather. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into our skills and passives and gear. So our basic gameplay loop consists of casting Rune Bolt till we get our runes, Flame Rush towards our enemies, which will automatically proc our Eragon's Mirror Bolt, which should delete the majority of the enemies around us. If they don't, quickly reapply your Rune Bolts and you can hard cast it again directly. Now for bosses, you're going to want to include a Frost Wall, which will further buff your damage. You want to let the duration tick up, which will give you significantly more damage. We want to further boost our damage. We can use our Flame Ward offensively, which will give us an increased damage and increased flat spell. So we're going to start out with Rune Bolt. First of all, we convert it fully to cold to utilize the immutable order aspect of our runic invocation. So we make sure this is fully cold. We take the maximum increase to cast speed and the highest percentage chance of applying our haste, because this is the source of haste for our build. We take 3 points into Rune Weave and enough points here to make sure that our runic invocation constantly crits, and the Mora Multi here, and then I stack as much Armor Shred as possible because we don't have that many hits to apply a ton of stacks. Ideally, as I mentioned earlier, we would like to use the Runestone because this basically triples the amount of rune or Armor Shred stacks that we can apply. Currently it's bugged with Immutable Order and it breaks which runes it generates, which causes some problems. You accidentally invoke the wrong thing, then you don't have your ward generation and you die to something stupid, or it burns your mana down, and when you flame rush you don't have enough mana to actually invoke your runic, and therefore you don't cast it and don't get your ward gen. So those two things downside, I'm willing to give up the extra damage to just have quality of life. Moving on to our Frost Wall. We spec up here to get the ward from our enemies passing through. It isn't much, but it's something. We spec as much added duration as possible and the Mora Multiplier while we have it up against Chilled. We take the maximum amount of ward gain and mana. We take 3 points into Spire's Arrival. So this ability is kind of busted. There is a bug with it. The bug is if you physically walk through your wall without Flame Rush, you will get the buff and it will be permanent as long as you don't directly cast Runic Invoke. So I try to avoid abusing this during my gameplay in the videos. You do not see me abusing it. I always like to directly invoke to get rid of the buff. There is at the beginning a demonstration of what happens when you let the wall last for 8 seconds and then walk through it and see what the damage really can ramp up to. I definitely see this node getting toned down. Not being permanent, obviously, because yeah, you charge it up and you can just go Flame Rush to your heart's content with Giga Strong Mirror Bolts bouncing around. We take the cleanse and then we take the explosions, and I like to have my wall blow up when I walk through it. That way I know when I've actually passed through it for sure. And then we take a few points to get a little extra haste and frenzy, because why not? Moving over to our runic invocation, we take 4 points into Word of Raya to get additional fire spell for our mirror bolts. We take the elemental pin, which this is also currently bugged, applying it 7 times its current effect. So we'll see what happens whenever that is fixed. We take 2 points into Transcriber of Power to maintain this buff. Technically, you can get away with 1 point. I just do 2 because I don't really have any place that I feel like it'd be better to put my points. We got 4 points to maximize the reduction of our cooldown. We're currently sitting at a 5.2 second. I could equip an Opal Ring to get this down to 5 or 4.9, depending on the roll. But I currently don't have an Opal Ring with the stats that I would like. We take Runic Energy, 4 points here to have ideally 90% on our first cast, and then somewhere between a 20 and a 30% chance to duplicate our Runic Invocation each time we cast it, every time after that. Flame Rush, pretty straightforward. We take Branding Cold to have a brand for when we get to our passives. You get that added ward on hit and spell damage against bosses. Since we're using Flame Rush every 2 seconds, we have full uptime against bosses with this brand, so we don't have to worry about applying Brand of Deception. We take the maximum amount of ward generated and damage reduction from our Flame Rush, since we are casting it so frequently. We get the Frenzy duration, and then I've also spec'd up here for some added hits to apply just a little more Armor Shred because we are not able to apply a ton of stacks. Flame Ward, pretty straightforward. We take our extra charges, maximize their DR, and we're actually using our Flame Ward somewhat offensively to help burst down our bosses. Looking over our passives, you won't see anything that would surprise you here. It's pretty straightforward. We're taking our extra cast speed, crit multi, crit chance, maximizing int throughout our tree. We want to get 6 points here for our move speed. Again, maximizing int here. This gives us additional cast speed as well. And in our Rune Master tree, it's pretty straightforward. We're taking anything with int. We're getting the 5 points for the Breaking Point and Cataclysm. Getting the crit multi here, maxing this out. Now granted, we don't get it doubled super frequently since we're invoking constantly, but it's something. We're still maxing int here, and then we're taking these points up. Once I word level 100, and my last point would go here and here. Alright, so going over our gearing, I'm using a Dragonhorn wand with critical strike multi. Ideally, your second prefix, you're going to want some form of percent increased damage. Cast speed is also good, but we don't really need a ton of cast speed to make this build feel good, so percent damage increase is going to be more efficient. Having Chill, Ignite, Shock on the wand also nice for guaranteed uptime for our damage reduction on enemies from our first hit. On our helm, we need an Arcane Visage to stack our cooldown recovery speed. Ideally, you're going to want flat plus intelligence and plus to runic invocation. Suffixes, not overly important. Amulet, some combination of frailty on hit, armor shred on hit, critical strike multiplier, spell damage, elemental, or percent fire. The base, I don't have an ideal base, an oracle amulet for a defensive option, or a brass amulet for an offensive option. Offhand, we're looking at a crystal skull with critical strike multiplier, either cast speed or crit, depending on where your stats are at. Ideally, you're going to want some better suffix pairings than a tier 1 like mine has on it, but that's beside the point. Buttermilk Criterion is a lot of the sweet juice from the build. We both use a wand and we scale with a Heo rune. So we're stacking strength, which stacking strength sounds a lot more fun than stacking dex or attunement, because we get the bonus of added armor. So we get a huge more multiplier from two huge more multipliers from our armor for our runic invokes. This is where a large portion of our damage for our mirror bolt comes from. We're currently stacked at 56 strength, which is pretty good. There's definitely some room for improvement on my gear. I don't have Exalted on one of my rings. I obviously could have LP on my Twisted Heart. That's a wish, but that's also, again, besides the point. Anything above 40 should be perfectly fine. For our rings, we're want to get int and strength. Ideally, I'd flip-flop those rolls. I'd have Exalted Strength and T5 int, but that's not what I have. Same for this ring. I would prefer int over the spell damage just for the ward retention, but this ring is the best one I could find to cover my resists. Belt, we're going to look for Exalted cooldown recovery speed. The other stats aren't overly important. You want an armor base. Boots, obviously strength, cooldown reduction speed are the priority stats on your boots. For our gloves, again, you're going to want a combination of int, strength, and then frailty and armor shred, covering whichever one your amulet does not have. Very important to have frailty on your build. Ideally, I'd like to get a pair of gloves that are dual prefix that I like this, that have a better chance of frailty. 12's a little low for this build. I don't always maintain 3 stacks on dangerous enemies. Not overly a problem yet, but I could see it becoming a problem if I'm pushing, 600-700 corruption and trying to really push an arena. Obviously, we're using a Twisted Heart. You want a one with a high strength roll. For our idols, Throne of Ambitions, the main thing of importance here. Everything else is just resist HP to get some more ward generation from a glass idol. You can add more damage here if you have your resist covered from your rings. It's kind of dealer's choice on your idols.